Hello, everybody. My name is MysterE, and welcome. Today, we're going to be I don't know, analyzing how things have been going, I guess, for the last few days since the election, and then, more specifically, we're going to be looking at, kind of what are the next steps for Trump now? Like, what's the world predicting is going to happen now? Like, the unbelievable has happened, and Trump has kind of taken power again. Like, it's really weird, isn't it? How, like, kind of, we've been here before. Like, we've all experienced this before, and like, people are just so shocked that this would happen again. Like, Trump would get, I don't know, re-elected. Like, it was just such a, unpredictable turn of events for a lot of people. And like, the question has to be asked, like, why this is so unpredictable for so many people. Like, honestly, it really doesn't make any sense at all. Like, he was always, I think, in with pretty good odds, knowing the American system. And like, for anyone who is just completely discounting it, it's just, I guess, have you learned nothing from last time, basically? So let's have a look, kind of like how the world's reacting to it, and then we're going to specifically, yeah, like I said, kind of look at what, yeah, Trump is actually going to do moving forward. So let's go over first to see what the BBC has to say. Obviously, they have a lot of a stake in it, the old British, because, well, like, their economy is completely in shambles at the moment. And like Australians, like, they're completely beholden to the Americans for, you know, not only like their economic interests, but like their broader strategic interests, like, in terms of military and all that type of stuff. So like, you know, their opinion on this is going to be interesting because, they are completely, at the mercy of the US. So let's see what the BBC has to say as they unpack what's been going on since Trump's victory. Like, the title of it, what Trump's victory means for the world. And this is part of the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Lucy Hawkins.
They're doing a
From the
service to
BBC World
us.
Service, this is the global story.
Let me know if
Donald
the
Trump
audio is
is the
okay.
winner in what could be the most consequential US presidential election in recent history. His victory comes in the context of multiple ongoing conflicts around the world and persistent instability in major global economies. International leaders are flocking to congratulate Mr. Trump, but how might their governments be reacting behind closed doors? Today we're considering how the...
Two quick points there. Like, yes, there's a lot of economic instability. Oh, good morning, 4IS. I didn't expect to see you. The audio is good, thank you very much, sir. I didn't expect to see you so early on a Sunday morning. But like, yeah, thank you for joining. We're going to be looking at kind of how the world's reacting to Trump and like what they're trying to predict is going to be coming next. So good to hear that the audio is working well. Thank you, as always, my tech guy, my audio man. Thank you very much. Yeah, so like, two things. Sorry, I digress. You know, the world is in economic shambles at the moment. So like, Trump's victory is like kind of really pressing for the globe because everyone's trying to kind of get themselves together after, like, I guess, COVID, and like the implications that COVID has kind of had on the world economy, that is, like how people just aren't really recovering properly, and it's kind of not business as usual anymore in a globalization sense. Like, people are trying to refigure out their entire and restructure their entire economies. Two is like how she mentioned that like the world leaders are really scrambling at the moment, or they were scrambling really fast to be the first to congratulate Trump. And like, while that's not unusual, like, they're making a big deal about it because like a lot of world leaders are very dismissive of Trump. That was dismissive the first time, like ultra dismissive, saying like, it'll be the end of the world as we know it. And this time they're kind of like, nah, he's not going to get in again. And they've been dismissive of him again. But like, they realize now, obviously, how important it is because like Trump, like, as you know from his whole persona, he's the deal guy kind of thing. So like as the deal guy, like you'll notice that like he doesn't play the kind of political games that like other presidents might do in terms of like diplomacy. He's just like, this is what I want, this is what you got that I want, like kind of thing, and then like he just cuts a deal with people, and if they don't like it, they're fired. So like in terms of the way that in terms of like a Trump victory, in terms of like world like political relations now, like everybody wants to kind of just show that they are willing to like to discuss with him and be open with him so they can get a nice place on the negotiating table, which is interesting. Like it's not about like kind of establishment politics. This is just like reaction politics. Like they've got to make sure that they, you know, are appealing to the whims of Donald Trump.
The newly minted president-elect could make his presence felt in the ongoing conflicts in Ukraine and the Middle East, in China, Europe and beyond.
And beyond. Maybe even space. Who knows? We'll have to talk to Musk about that one. Hey?
With me today is our diplomatic correspondent, James Landau. Hi, James.
G'day, James.
And what a result. Came quicker than many thought it would. It's a surprise for many, but I know you've been speaking to diplomats around the world, embassies.
Well, like, what do they mean for IS? Like, what do they mean by Reagan on steroids? Like, we spent a little bit of time at the end of the last live stream going through why he is, like, kind of now anti-neoliberal. So, like, Reagan kind of broke up the American kind of labor movement, hyper-financialized like America, and like everything that Trump seems to be talking about is kind of opposite to that neoliberal agenda. So like Reagan on steroids, I don't agree with it personally. Okay, so like I wonder what they are meaning there. Like he's just another kind of popular figure that is going to do like, you know, long term you know, change, like significant changes in the way that global politics is run. Like if that's what they're talking about, then yeah, I guess he'll be Reagan on steroids in that regard. But like his policy discussion, like in terms of all the tariff stuff, and the way that he goes in and cuts deals with people, as we were just talking about, I don't see that to be very Reaganite.
In residences around the world this week, and I wonder what you think the reaction is to this result.
I think inevitably there's going to be a sense of shock, simply because when you've been listening to the broadcast, listening to the pollsters, telling everybody it's knife edge, you know, touch and go, don't know which way it's going to go, to have such a decisive result as this is clearly going to come as a surprise. Do I think the victory of Donald Trump has come as a surprise? No. I think everybody has been realistic enough to know that this has always been a very clear possibility.
And preparing for it.
And well, the question is,
I don't know about
that's
that,
a really
man.
good point. Have they been preparing?
Exactly, they haven't
I've
been.
spoken to a lot of European.
If they had,
and they will say, yes, no,
they wouldn't be as
we
shocked.
must prepare for it. And then I say, well, what are you doing? Well, we can't anticipate it because we'd be annoying the previous incumbent if you start making assumptions about elections. And, you know, we have to leave it up to the Americans to make their own decisions. I think there is genuinely a sense that certainly in the European diplomatic world that not enough has been done to so-called Trump-proof Europe from this future presidency.
Okay.
And like, isn't that telling? Like, if they weren't Trump-proofing themselves, like they really didn't see this coming, or they really weren't hoping for that type of a Trump victory, basically. Maybe turn up the BBC video a bit. Okay, can do, sir. Good call.
We're going to get into Trump-proofing foreign policy and take a whistle-stop tour around the globe for this episode. And the conflict that comes to mind straight away, James, of course, is Ukraine as it continues to battle Russia's ongoing invasion. Remind us what Donald Trump has said before about the war in Ukraine and what he'll do to bring an end to it.
Well, the first thing I always say is, you know, there's quite often a gap between what Donald Trump says and what he does. And sometimes what he says can be contradictory. So it's not always a good predictor of what he actually intends to do, because sometimes it's part of a negotiating ploy. Sometimes, you know, it's just difficult to work out because, you know, as I say, the statements are contradictory. However, he has made it pretty clear that he wants this war to end. He wants to be part of the process of making that war end. He's spoken of doing a deal. He's spoken of making calls to both President Zelensky and to President Putin during this period now when he's president-elect, i.e. before he actually enters the White House. He wants there to be some kind of a deal. There's an expectation that US support will diminish in the long term. The question is, what is the pace of that, while any kind of talk of a deal, a peace settlement, comes into play?
Let's bring you the reaction from Kyiv. Here's our Ukraine correspondent, James Waterhouse.
It is hard to see what security guarantees Ukraine can get to secure its long-term future. That's certainly the argument from here. But President Zelensky has a knack of, when there are political difficulties, when the war isn't going his way, and it hasn't been for some time, he tries to leverage this into future assurances and commitments from his allies, and it will be no different with Donald Trump.
Our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, is in Sochi with this assessment.
Well, it feels like the Kremlin is going out of its way to give the impression that it's not excited at all by Donald Trump's victory. A Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, said that, as far as he knows, Vladimir Putin has no plans to congratulate Donald Trump. He said America is an unfriendly country which is involved directly and indirectly in a war with Russia.
Can I ask you about the relationships in this picture and what difference that might make? We've already had a response from President Zelensky.
I don't know. I thought there was already some stuff that was going around from Putin to say that, you know, he's happy for like Trump, and he's, you know, congratulates him on his victory or something like that. So, like, I don't know if that's like outdated now. Like, this is only 8 hours old, so they should be pretty up to date with it. But I've seen already some stuff going around, some footage of a meeting where Putin's having like kind of a conference, and like various groups from around the world are kind of interviewing him and like asking him questions about what's going to happen next with Trump, and like, you know, and he said like kind of, yeah, he congratulates the new president, and like he's, you know, assured people that like his relationships with like China and other key players in the world economy is not going to change based on any kind of new presidency or shift in America's kind of political alignment now that we have a Republican president. So you know, I think what they're talking about though, like Russia is playing kind of like, you know, the calm game. You know, they're just trying to like, you know, fly under the radar and not seem kind of too excited that like Donald Trump is back in. But like, that's Putin in a nutshell from what I understand about him. Like, he is kind of as an old KGB operator who's kind of made his way to the very top of that social structure. He kind of knows how to play people and knows how to play people for the long game. So I don't see him doing anything outrageous in terms of, you know, being so excited and endorsing Trump. Like, yeah, so like, I don't know what they're trying to say here with that observation.
How would you describe the relationship between President Trump and President Zelensky, and can we learn anything from that reaction that we've had already?
There is a relationship. I wouldn't say it's very close. I wouldn't say it's terribly warm. What was interesting, what President Zelensky has said in response to the victory of Mr. Trump, is that he spoke of the importance and how much Ukraine relies on what he called a strong bipartisan support of the United States. And he also sort of hinted that, look, a powerful Ukrainian army could play a role in European security. In other words, he essentially made the argument to Mr. Trump, I need your support. But you know what? I can also give some of that support back. I know you want Europe to step up more on its defence front. I could potentially help with that. That was the message he was sending. But, you know, let's not beat about the bush. The Ukrainians are very, very concerned about the uncertainty of what a Trump presidency would involve.
And one of the things they're concerned about, surely, is the fact that President Trump has been very warm towards President Putin at times. We know he's an admirer.
And he said as such while standing shoulder to shoulder with Mr. Zelensky when they did a little photo op in New York.
So we have a very good relationship, and I also have a very good relationship, as you know, with President Putin. And I think if we win, I think we're going to get it resolved very quickly. I really think we're going to get it resolved.
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have, I see.
This caused more arguments than any product.
Yeah, like right in front of him. Just like, yeah, don't worry, I'll sort it out and I'll do it very quickly. Because like a lot of the talk that's like about this has been that like Trump said he was going to sort out the war in Ukraine like within a day kind of thing. Because he's that kind of deal broker kind of guy. So like, you know, let's see if Trump can pull a rabbit out of the hat. But like, that's what I think they're talking about in terms of Zelensky being kind of, or Ukraine generally being nervous about a Trump victory, because like Trump doesn't give a shit about like Ukraine. Okay, he has a bunch of cards and he's keeping them close to his chest, and like Ukraine will be one of those cards in his diplomatic relations with Europe at large. Like he's already said to Europe like he's sick of paying for NATO kind of thing, or like, you know, their defense, and like he's going to kind of pull out of that. And Europe are basically, you know, they have kind of basically just demilitarized a lot since the end of the Cold War, and as a result of that, they were not ready at all for what Russia did when they stepped up their war in Ukraine in 2022. So like Trump's basically just saying, I'm not going to pay for this stuff anymore, and he's going to use that he's going to use Ukraine as a bargaining tool in his relations with Europe. And like the European Union have met just since Trump kind of was elected, and they've said like in no uncertain terms, we are completely screwed at the moment economically, potentially militarily, and we need to look after ourselves moving forward. I think Macron described Europe as a herbivore in some strange analogy, where he's saying the world is made up by carnivores and herbivores, and Europe is a herbivore basically at the moment, and we need to become a carnivore in order to survive in the new world order. And so you'll see a lot of this type of discussion coming out about like how Trump is going to negotiate with Europe moving forward, and this all centers around these tariffs and all that sort of stuff too. So let's see.
Deal. He likes to trade.
He wants to do a deal, but he doesn't want.
You know,
I hope we have more good relations.
We're going to have, oh, I see.
Mr. Trump likes to do a deal. He likes to
He
trade.
wants to do a deal, but he doesn't want to be seen to be rolling over to the Kremlin's demands.
It's the crucial point. That is absolutely the crucial point. And that's why Mr. Putin's attitude is really crucial here. Because if Vladimir Putin reaches the conclusion, now is not the time for me to do a deal, I'm making gains in the East. And so the question is then, what happens then? If Mr. Trump has put forward a deal and said, let's bang heads together, and the Russians say, no, we'll just carry on fighting. At that point, does Donald Trump say, okay, I'm going to give some more long-range missiles to the Ukrainians, and you know what? I'm going to let them deep fire into Russia as deep as they want to go, far as they want to go. Donald Trump does not fear escalation as much as Joe Biden and his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, do.
Is another worry for the Ukrainians, not just President Trump in charge, but also what's happening with Congress, that actually, you know, they are making decisions on how much support.
Worth talking about. Like Biden, you know, typical kind of, I guess you would say, establishment politician or like middle of the road politician. They're like not too keen on escalating wars where not necessary. There's probably longer term economic goals there. There's probably longer term relationships and promises that they've made to their own political donors and strategists, etc., etc. But like Trump, as a rogue, let's call it, as someone who kind of plays to their own tune, like if Russia's not going to come to the table and give him what he wants, like what they're talking about here is like Trump will just be like, all right, fine, if you don't want to play ball, then like we've already got sanctions on you, we will just start like giving Ukraine better weaponry so they can actually do damage within your own Russian borders. And so like Trump is different to like kind of the Democratic puppets in that sense. Or even like, you know, establishment Republicans would be in that sense. So like he is more of a threat to Russia than any establishment politician would typically be. So like, you know, for all those people out there that have been like, so gung-ho about like, the war in Ukraine and, supporting I stand with Ukraine and all this sort of stuff. But like, they're typically a lot of the people that would be, in the camp that are like anti kind of Trump. There's a lot of that kind of contradictory overlay going on there. Like, Trump is probably the type of guy that's going to, arm wrestle Russia if they don't play ball and, and help out Ukraine. Like I said, on the provision, though, that Russia don't want to play ball with Trump. Well, time will tell.
To give Ukraine, how much money to send Ukraine as well. And we've seen a massive tilt back to the Republicans.
Yeah, I mean, that will be a strategic blockage in the long run that will make it harder to get these things through. It's likely during President Biden's lame duck period, he will use every sort of legal presidential power he's got outside of Congress to keep as much money flowing to Ukraine as he can. But once President Trump takes office, once the new Congress is established, yes, I think you're absolutely right. It will get harder.
Because there is a mechanism, isn't there, for President Biden to release $5 billion?
Yes, a chunk of funds.
Yeah.
He can do a chunk of funds. The question for Europeans is what can and should we do to fill that gap left by the Americans?
We'll get on to Europe in a moment, but let's turn to the other big conflict, which is the Middle East. Israel continuing its war with Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and it remains unclear the extent to which direct engagement between Israel and Iran may continue to escalate as well, James. But he's pretty popular in Israel, President Trump.
So, yeah, the Israelis are happy, and not just the Netanyahu government. I think, Israelis in general thought that they basically had a fairer crack of the whip under Donald Trump than they did in Joe Biden, who they always saw as a sort of, an American who was always saying, look, please don't do this and please don't do that. The problem is this. When Donald Trump was in power last time, there was no war in the Middle East. There is now. The world has changed. And so the question, the immediate question now is, if in the next few weeks, Benjamin Netanyahu says, right, I now want to target Iran's nuclear facilities, something that the Biden administration has been very, very firm about, saying, no, we are not going to support you in this. But there's a real question now is, will Donald Trump allow Israel a freer hand to fight the war in a way that it can't at the moment? Lots of people say the Americans have not been restraining Israel enough.
Like, what does that even mean? Like, it's not like Netanyahu actually cares about what anyone else thinks. Like, like they were just saying, like, Biden's administration has been like, nah, calm down. We don't want you to do that. And they've just been escalating on whatever front they feel necessary. And, like, he's doing some pretty crazy stuff, old Netanyahu. So, like, I don't see... Like, okay, he might be a little bit more emboldened by a Trump victory, but, like, he was going to do basically whatever he felt like anyway, because, like, America weren't putting their foot down and saying, no, that's a bad Israel. You cannot do that anymore, and giving them a smack or anything like that. There was no slap on the wrist, really, coming from the Americans.
But there has been some restraint. Will that change under Donald Trump, or will he, as he has said, be a peacemaker and say, I don't want to get involved in other people's wars? He might try and do both. He might say to the Israelis, I'm going to give you a free hand to complete it, to finish it, to bring it to a close.
Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, is in Jerusalem, and she's been assessing the reaction of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
It's significant that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has become one of the first foreign leaders to speak to Donald Trump. And the Israeli readout of their conversation, which was described as warm and cordial, is said to have discussed Israel's security, including the Iranian threat. Donald Trump has often urged Israel to, in his words, finish the job. We'll soon find out exactly what he means.
It remains to be seen, too, how much leverage Donald Trump will have over Benjamin Netanyahu, because no one else has had much so far.
That's what I was
Correct.
talking about.
And as
Like,
with all these
honest.
things, any sense of personal slight,
Let's be honest.
any sense of being ignored, suddenly the calculation can change. Because with Mr. Trump, as the lesson we learnt from his first term, is personality is as important as policy.
James, what about the wider region? They were pretty quick, the Gulf states, to come out and congratulate Donald Trump as well, given what we saw with the Abraham Accords, but also some of the things, the relationship that they've been building up with the US. Are they going to be happy?
I think they will like the fact that Donald Trump, will want to clearly step up pressure on Iran. It's one thing that he's been quite vocal about in a relatively foreign policy free election campaign. We know that Donald Trump has spoken about trying to sort of, come up with the Abraham Accords Mark II. In other words, the elusive deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel, trying to normalize relations between those two countries. Now, it's still seen a long way away from the fighting that we're engaged in now. You need to have some sort of peace settlement, some kind of ceasefire, some kind of exchange, some kind of stabilization. Then you might just be able to get to a place where you can talk about broader political deals.
Time to look at China, James, and we know that
China! Yeah, we got there. Like, the only thing that we can really say about the whole Israel situation is, like, what they've said. Like, Trump, like, if you look at, like, his agenda there, like, he's been on his bandwagon throughout his whole campaign about the fact that, like, he didn't start any new wars or, like, anything like that. So, like, if he wants Israel to hurry up and get on with it and just finish kind of, like, their little flurry on the edges of their little empire, then, like, yeah, well, he's just going to give them a free rein by the sound of it to just finish off what they're doing as quickly as possible, clean it up, and so the world will stop talking about their indiscretions in the Middle East. So, not much hope there for all of you kind of, you people that are hopeful, I guess, for a two-state solution or some type of end to the conflict. I don't see that happening. He didn't start a war equals semantics. Yeah, well, you're right. You're very right there. It is definitely semantics for IS. However, like, it allows him to put the propaganda machine into motion to make out, like, him as a global leader is better for the world than any of his political adversaries. And so, like, if he can demonstrate as well, if he can pull Israel and say, look, do whatever you want, just do it quickly, then he will be able to use that to say, hey, look, I fixed up what was going on in the Middle East, and Biden and co couldn't do that. So I see that as a pretty accurate kind of prediction of what he's potentially doing. He played manufacturing consent well. No, yeah, I know, right? No denying that. You can't really deny how well he was able to manufacture the conversation around that. And, like, all of his little pawns did that really well as well. All of the right-wing kind of influencers and thinkers out there, they're all like, yeah, he didn't start any wars and stuff like that. And he got out of wars too. So, like, yeah, it's an interesting playbook for someone who's kind of, like, on a side of the political spectrum that you would think, being the right, that are more than happy to be kind of belligerent. So, like, militaristic, like, military aggressive, militarily aggressive if necessary. So,
relations between the two countries, they're not as bad as they were a couple of years ago. They are still pretty icy, though, and they could be set to change in a big way because of Donald Trump's approach to China, particularly when it comes to what he considers to be the unfair trade relationship. What do you think that could mean in terms of the US and its relationship with China?
Okay, the first point is that there are already trade frictions between China and the United States, and there would have been trade frictions too that would get deeper if Kamala Harris had been elected. So this is a bipartisan thing. So whatever Trump does would be a continuation of existing policy, but with rocket boosters underneath it. And by that primarily is his threat to impose 60% tariffs on Chinese goods entering the US market. Now, if that's what he does, the potential there is for a trade war, and then the potential for a trade war that engulfs the global economy. Many countries around the world, if this happens, are going to have to...
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest things that could actually come out of, like, whatever Trump intends to do over, the next 4 years is, like, an actual trade war. Like, the globalized world is so kind of precarious. It sits on an absolute knife edge in terms of, like, how the global economy works these days, with all of these fancy kind of quick movements of, like, supply chains throughout, like, the world system, and, like, the just-in-time system of many large corporations that produce a lot of the value that goes into the world economy. And so like classic examples, like what happened with COVID. Like once COVID kind of was in full force and like the supply chains kind of broke down and like global shipping started to be impacted, and there were like, you know, container ships that were kind of sitting at ports waiting or outside of ports because they couldn't enter and all this sort of stuff. Like we still haven't recovered from like the lag time between like what was effectively impacts to global shipping lanes and trade routes and stuff like that. We still haven't really recovered from that. So like a trade war, like a full-blown trade war where he puts a tariff on and then they put tariffs on in terms of all the operations that the Americans have in China, and then they start stepping it up on either side, and like that has implications for how like capital circulates around the world. And like I use capital in the Marxist sense here. Like capital is not just like, you know, money. So money that's used for investing. Like capital is also the commodities themselves, the means of production themselves, how they're moving around the world. A trade war, even with people that like, you know, aren't even implicated. So like China and America are duking it out, but like there's no actual impacts or tariffs on other people. Like it's still going to affect the flow of capital. And if like capitalism is all about like the easy flow of capital goods, including money in the commodity form, it's easy flow and circulation. Any impediments to that are going to have serious impacts to the global economy. And if everyone, like we've already talked about before, are under extreme, you know, economic pressures anyway, then like, you know, the world is in for economic crises here. Do you think that Trump might accelerate deglobalization? Well, like, yeah, I think he will. He will definitely. He's like already talking about it. Like all he wants to do is make America great again. I.e., he wants to make them resilient enough to withstand like any reliance on China in terms of like their just their day-to-day economic comings and goings. And like he will look to kind of their region, I think, to kind of stabilize the American economy. Now, like that will mean that like they'll turn to people that are closer to them, so Canada, Mexico, like the South American nations, in order to seek labor and resources that they need to continue to make their kind of economy work. But on like in the global sense, like you won't have the American, like, you know, Team America out there policing the world anymore. And so like global supply chains in terms of like having a sea that is safe to traverse, which like the Americans have guaranteed now since basically the end of World War II, like with that going, like people won't be able to rely on global networks anymore. So like the Americans retracting their navy is going to have massive implications on the global economy, and that will add to deglobalization. The irony of Trump achieves the degrowth policies. It would be indirect though. Yeah, it would be indirect. But like, you know, degrowth for who? Degrowth for the world. Like, I assume that the long game is that it's not degrowth for America and American interests, in terms of, like I said, the long game. Maybe in the short term, but that's not the intention long term, I'd say.
To make choices. Do they go with the Chinese or do they go with the Americans on this? Because the Americans will put out a huge amount of pressure on all its allies to say, we're doing this, you've got to do likewise. In many ways, a lot of America's allies sort of had a holiday from this because of the, you know, wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, the run up to this election. Those pressures are sort of, you know, the electoral pressure is now gone, and I think it's going to make some tough choices.
And Laura Becker in Beijing told us the latest on the relationship between China and the US.
Beijing will be bracing itself for the return of Donald Trump, and for one reason will be trade. And that is because during the last Trump presidency, trade put tariffs on around $300 billion of Chinese goods, and he's threatening to do so again.
And James, in terms of regional security, do we
300
know
billion.
where
Damn.
President Trump sees the US and its relationship with Taiwan and supporting Taiwan, possible intervention if there was a conflict?
It's incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard to know that. And that is in part because the Americans don't want us to know. They want there to be some strategic ambiguity over this. But also, we don't know whether or not Donald Trump actually will live up to his word of saying, I'm not going to start new wars. He's great. He loves to be the man who ends forever wars. But equally, is he somebody who's going to give up all US leadership in the world? That's the really interesting question, which is one that I don't think the Make America Great protectionism and introspection of the first term ever really had to answer that question.
You mentioned Donald Trump and his way of thinking about America's place in the world. When it comes to their more traditional allies, particularly here in Europe, it looks very different in Europe now than it did when he was president before. When you think about the rise of some of the more right-leaning parties in European countries, Emmanuel Macron is the only major, I think, surviving world leader. How do you think he's going to deal with this new Europe?
He will try and deal with Europe, as he did before, on a bilateral basis, on a transactional basis. He will try and peel everybody off so he can do separate trade deals as much as he can. It's very hard within the European Union. And I think that he will continue to put more pressure on the Europeans to spend more on their own defence. And there'll be usual rumbles threatening NATO. I think the really interesting question is this.
There's a huge range of value when you're...
But yeah, I think that's exactly what he will do. He will kind of try to split the Europeans against one another to get whatever's beneficial to the Americans, obviously. But I don't know how everyone keeps talking about how Europe's moved further to the right kind of thing since he was there last time, and that's going to be a big thing in the political landscape for him now, because you have all these right-wing or populist politicians that have popped up across Europe, and so that is going to change things. I don't know how that's really going to change things. If anything, Trump is speaking about how speaks highly of these types of people. So I don't know if that's going to make it more difficult, if that's what they're insinuating for Trump.
The Trump presidency going to be the wake-up call that Europe has been needing, a catalyst that essentially gets the Europeans to say, you know what, we've got to get off the pot and make some tough decisions about our own defence. What about economic growth in Europe? Is now the moment where Europe says, actually, you know what? In the face of this economic threat, if we are going to stay alive, we have to agree a new plan to make Europe more competitive. And thirdly, what about China? Europe is divided.
Yes, I've heard a lot of people speaking about this as well. Now that, Trump has been re-elected and he's going to be all protectionist and, looking after America #1 kind of thing, Europe has to kind of make some hard decisions really fast. But I just don't see the Europeans being able to do that because the union isn't that efficient. It doesn't seem to be that effective. But time will tell.
About China at the moment. Does the election of Trump change that thinking? Does it wake people up in Europe? Because at the moment, as I said at the beginning, there's a lot of people who haven't really prepared for this.
You briefly mentioned the fact that he's always angry that Europe's not paying for its fair share when it comes to defence, and also that constant threat when he was last president that he would withdraw the US from NATO. Does he have more leverage this time around on those two things? I mean, do you think that the threat to withdraw from NATO, he could make good on, or could he encourage countries and successfully make them pay for more?
Look, I think his driving force here is not some sort of ideological hatred of NATO or anything like that. It's just this sense that America has been taken for granted, that the Europeans are free riders. If the Europeans, as they have done, can address that by increasing their defence expenditure, which, the numbers are creeping up. At the moment, every NATO member state has to spend 2% of their national wealth on defence. I think that target's going to have to go up. I think that's going to have to go up to 2.5%, maybe even 3%. Countries like Poland are already meeting that target, and so we'll be fine. The UK would be stretched. A lot of other countries in the south of Europe would really struggle to do that.
A lot of people think he's an isolationist, America First obviously being his sort of main platform. But do you actually imagine that America is going to retreat from its role as the world's leader on some of these big issues, when we also know that Donald Trump likes a deal? He likes to be seen to be making a deal. He said to people he wouldn't mind winning the Nobel Peace Prize. He has an ego. Maybe he is the one to close the deal on things like Ukraine and the Middle East.
The optimistic view is that, yes, he's a disruptor, he's a change maker, he will generate fresh thinking on issues, you know, it might be on Ukraine, it might be on the Middle East, and that therefore, instead of a sort of slow, gradual continuation of not quite giving enough support.
You know, I get a sense now from listening to various people talk about like what this Trump election means compared to the last one. The last one was all doomsday stuff, like Trump's in, like for people inside America, they were going to leave the country and all that sort of stuff. For people outside America, it was going to be the end of the world as we know it. This time, I get the sense that like people are a lot more hopeful. They're just like the usual political processes, the bourgeois political system is failing to address the problems of late stage capitalism and like the constraints that it is putting on the world at large. Bourgeois democracy, bourgeois parliamentarianism and politics is failing everyone, and like the usual civil discourse and the usual pleasantries are just not cutting it anymore in the face of the fact that capitalism is really succumbing to its major contradictions. Okay, so this is like capitalism in the totality sense, like across the globe as like as a global entity. And people have this air of hope around them because Trump is going to come in and as a rogue, as a disruptor, as our friend here has described, they're kind of hoping like, oh, well, like if he comes in and shakes the tree, maybe that's going to fix things a little bit. And like these are the type of, you know, liberal spokespersons that, you know, would never vote for Trump in their lifetime anyway. They'd never really openly support someone like Trump. But when he gets elected, they're kind of like, well, you know, maybe he can do some of the things that no one else actually has the ability to pull out of the hat. Like, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? Interesting.
Support to Ukraine, not quite constraining Israel enough under the previous regime, that could change things. My own inclination is, you know, he will engage in things in the world where they matter to his voters at home. But the point is this, is the world has already noticed that US influence is declining. Countries around the world are forming more ad hoc relationships, partnerships, occasionally alliances with other countries around the world. And I think that Donald Trump will be quite happy for that to happen if it's nothing to do with him.
But could his tactics possibly work? I mean, I have this great quote from him. I don't want them to know what I'm doing. He's talking about his allies, his adversaries, whoever. Part of my value is the perception by adversaries and allies that I am unpredictable. I mean, does he have this sort of huge strategic advantage that he just doesn't behave like anyone else they've negotiated with?
Speaking
that is an advantage that means that
he shakes the tree.
Mr. Putin will find it probably harder to work out what Donald Trump will do than he will with Joe Biden. Joe Biden has 40, 50 years worth of foreign policy baggage that allows you to know roughly where he's going to go. Less so with Donald Trump. And I think that sense of uncertainty is useful in certain moments. But it's not a strategic advantage if you are seen as a leader who will change his or her mind because of pressure, because of changing circumstances, because of what a tweet you've seen, then in that case, they will rely on that unpredictability. And if you can base your assumption on that, then you can use that as a strategic gain when you're trying to negotiate with him or play him. We know what is predictable about Donald Trump is that he's transactional, he's bilateral, and he can be, capricious.
Capricious.
But what is unpredictable is the immediate decision-making processes that sometimes can go in unexpected places.
It is going to be an interesting 4 years
Gonna be all right.
ahead. James, thank you so much.
It will be.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
very much.
James. You're a legend. Good on ya. All right, so let's have a look at like actually what Trump is doing, because I think that this is rather interesting. There's been a little bit of a beat up on this one since like Trump was elected. Like this is old footage, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, this is a year old, this footage, right, of what Trump plans to do, okay? This is what his, plan is for the next 4 years. And this has resurfaced and people were talking about it on X. And like they're kind of making a big deal about it again. I guess because like obviously he's been elected. But like they're making it sound like this is some new phenomena that's just happened. But yeah, this is Trump's kind of 10-point plan, I guess you would call it, in terms of what he wants to kind of do once he's in office. And there's some pretty hardcore things in there in terms of how a populist leader, like all I can think of in terms of comparison is like a Caesar figure, is going to like storm into the Capitol, take power, and he's going to make these dramatic kind of changes to the empire in order to give kind of wealth and prosperity back to the entirety of society, not just those who have corrupted it on the top end. So let's hear what Trump's kind of plan is to dismantle the deep state, basically.
Dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption.
Corruption.
Here's my plan to dismantle the deep state and reclaim our democracy from Washington corruption once and for all. And corruption it is. First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively. Second, we will clean out all of the corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence apparatus, and there are plenty of them.
Can we just pause on that one? Did you hear that? Let's just sorry. Let's just go back for a second.
Move rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively. Second, we will clean out all of the corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence apparatus.
Clear out rogue elements in the national security and intelligence apparatus. That is absolutely massive. Like last time somebody's, talked about doing that, I'm pretty sure it was a Kennedy. And we all know how that ended. But I've heard people talk about this as well in terms of basically saying that he's not going to make it to the 30th of January if he's going to go on with stuff like this. This is huge. They're national intelligence agencies, okay, let's say. They are rogue. And they've been rogue for a long time. There is a element within the bureaucratic machine. Well, I don't know if this is exactly Project 2025 stuff. This is his plan. From what I understand about Project 2025, it's from the Heritage Foundation. It's one of their conservative think tanks. I don't know if they exactly align with each other. And the X mandates of Trump. Yeah, we're covering, yes, these are his 10-point plan for what he's going to do once he gets into office. But keep in mind that this was this was a year ago, more than a year ago by the date that's off in the corner there. But that's it's good to know what he was planning to do prior to kind of taking office. If this is all just beat up, to get him over the line, or if he's actually gonna do this stuff, kind of like the whole Mexican wall thing. But taking on the ossified bureaucratic machine in the form of national intelligence agencies. Whoa. Those are some ingrained organizations that really control almost the globe in the background. So if he's going to put a leash on some of those things, that's huge. The Mexican wall is in project. 25? Legit. That's hilarious. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
And there are plenty of them. The departments and agencies that have been weaponized will be completely overhauled so that faceless bureaucrats will never again be able to target and persecute conservatives, Christians, or the left's political enemies, which they're doing now at a level that nobody can believe, even.
Did he just say the left's? I thought I heard that. He said, like, the left's enemies. So, like, it looks like he's trying to take a broad kind of brush stroke at, like he said, any faceless bureaucrat that is in the background, like, basically undermining the political process. Like, across the spectrum.
Impossible. Third, we will totally reform FISA courts, which are so corrupt that the judges seemingly do not care when they are lied to in warrant applications. So many judges have seen so many applications that they know were wrong, or at least they must have known. They do nothing about it. They're lied to. Fourth, to expose the hoaxes and abuses of power that have been tearing our country apart, we will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to declassify and publish all documents on deep state spying, censorship, and corruption. And there are plenty of them. Fifth, we will launch a major crackdown on government leakers.
Talking about, like, surveillance on their own people and stuff like that. That's interesting. Like, you know, we all know how much the Americans love to spy on their own people. There's been a lot of talk about that over the decades. But, like, you know, kind of reforming some of that's huge. Because, like, that goes right down to their constitutional kind of basis and, like, people's ability to be free from kind of being watched by the state and the potential tyrannical issues that comes with being followed as a free person by your own government. Like, these are huge things. Like, things that are very, like, I guess, traditional American stuff that has been kind of forgotten in, like, the craziness of the last, I don't know, so many decades of, yeah, I guess, neoliberal policy and globalization. Like, America is kind of going back to its roots, I guess you could say, with some of these ideas, which is interesting.
Who collude with the fake news to deliberately weave false narratives and to subvert our government and our democracy. When possible, we will press criminal charges. Sixth, we will make every Inspector General's office independent and physically separated from the departments they oversee so they do not become the protectors of the deep state. Seventh, I will ask Congress to establish an independent auditing system to continually monitor our intelligence agencies to ensure they are not spying on our citizens or running disinformation campaigns against the American people, or that they are not spying on someone's campaign like they spied on my campaign. Eighth, we will continue the effort launched by the Trump administration to move parts of the sprawling federal bureaucracy to new locations outside the Washington swamp. Just as
that's interesting as well, I must say. Like, the idea that you would move elements of the government that are centralized in one location, so the capital, and like have them put, like, throughout the nation, like, decentralize these. Like, I don't understand what the ball game is there. Like, I really can't tell what he's trying to do. If you decentralize areas of the government so they have to kind of, like, operate in different states, I guess you take away the power of how they can be easily controlled by certain organizations that work from, like, a top-down manner, because they're more spread out, so that they're detached from what's going on politically in Washington. So maybe that type of decentralization will make them more independent, and, like, if they're not kind of easily controlled by the same people, they can't be used as puppets, like these certain departments of government. So, like, maybe that's what he's talking about there, but, like, I'd have to understand more about what the plan is to actually have a proper judgment on that one. But, like, kind of moving departments out so they can become kind of more independent of, like, you know, politicians, like it's good and it's bad. Like they have less oversight, but like if they're not kind of encompassed by political decisions, they might be able to plan better and work better as an agency because they're not being influenced directly by politicians who are obviously corrupted by lobbying processes and big money. So like, I don't know, it seems solid, but like you always have to question basically what he's really up to, old Trump. Like, as nice as this sounds on paper, like what is he going to get out of this, or what is he trying to achieve with this one exactly? And like, you should be making that question with any politician anyway, and just thinking about things dialectically, like from a Marxist perspective or a historical materialist perspective. You want to be looking at like, what does he stand to get there? Number 9. I think that's coming.
As I moved the Bureau of Land Management to Colorado, as many as 100,000 government positions could be moved out, and I mean immediately, of Washington to places filled with patriots who love America, and they really do love America.
Love America.
9th, I will work to ban
Nine.
federal bureaucrats from taking jobs at the companies they deal with and that they regulate. So they deal with these companies and they regulate.
Huge. This is absolutely huge. There's a book in Australia, I'm not sure if you've ever read it, called Game of Mates. And like there's a newer version of it. But basically the entire thesis of that book, and this happens everywhere where you have liberal democracies, right, is that what happens is you have people that are in the bureaucracy, so they're in government, and their job is to head certain agencies. Like, let's use the EPA as an example, so the Environmental Protection Authority. The Environmental Protection Authority's job is to regulate businesses, developers, like the economy at large, to make sure, like other government agencies, to make sure that like the environment is protected by whatever is happening at the time. Now, what happens is, for the most part, is that the people that are at the heads of that organization, that government department, will usually have meetings with, heads of businesses that have to deal with them all the time, and they cozy up to them, and like they make decisions that will interest themselves once they leave this government department. So like usually when they finish up their role in the government, they step straight in as a consultant and hire themselves out to the same companies that they used to be regulating, or they just straight up join those companies anyway because they've got all the knowledge about how it works on the inside. They wrote the legislation or they helped regulate the industry anyway, and so like a lot of the decisions they're making while they're in government is things that will set them up for a better career after government. And then like they spend a bit of time on the other side, and then they kind of move back into government regulation after a while anyway. So you have people that were once working for the big companies that are destroying the environment, then go back in to the EPA that is supposed to be regulating it in the first place. So basically there's a revolving door that happens between the higher level bureaucrats in these agencies, in these government departments, between them and the companies and the businesses they're supposed to be regulating. And so like it just creates this incestuous cesspool of like, basically it's just corrupt behavior. Like these people are only looking out for their individual and their financial interests. They don't give a crap about the types of things that they're supposed to be regulating, and it creates this feedback loop where just nothing happens, and it's just like basically it's just a disgusting and despicable relationship. It's a bourgeois relationship between government and business. And so like he's talking about here, he's like banning that revolving door. You're in government, you're in government, you're in the private sector, you're in the private sector. Those two, one, they don't have the ability to make these linkages, these allegiances, these relationships that allow them to basically allow the business sector to exploit the government sector and allow these people just basically run a game of mates. That's, like I said, that's what the book is called. I think it's a more than adequate description of the situation, and like an analogy for how like the world really works between business and government. And he's going to clamp down on that. Like, if that is true, that is one way to massively put a stop on how late-stage capitalism is basically eroding and degrading kind of our civilization at a rapid pace. Like, we had a lot of faith in our institutions back in the day, like 50 years ago, if you look at surveys of people. But like, you know, faith in the government now is like at all-time lows, and like people just don't trust like government agencies and all that sort of stuff. And it's because of this kind of revolving door, this game of mates that happens. So like, if he's able to, you know, so he says, if he's going to like clamp down on that, that is huge. That is absolutely massive. Like, I can't explain honestly how significant that will be to the way that governance is done in a liberal democratic society.
Regulate these companies, and then they want to take jobs from these companies. Doesn't work that way. Such a public display cannot go on, and it's taking place all the time, like with Big Pharma. Finally, I will push a constitutional amendment to impose term limits on members of Congress. This is how I will shatter the deep state and restore government that is controlled by the people and for the people. Thank you very much.
By the people, for the people. Well, you know, changing the Constitution is revolutionary stuff. We talk about it a lot on this channel, so like, that's massive. That's massive. And like, yeah, putting limits on how long certain people can serve, you know, wow. That's kind of the opposite of what people say about Trump, is that like, you know, if there's a big possibility that he's going to make himself dictator for life kind of thing, like you've seen in China and Russia and all that sort of stuff. Why not get on that bandwagon? But like, he's talking about cutting off the political terms for, you know, politicians that are, you know, that basically go to help create this revolving door between business and the government agencies. So like, let's do a complete turn now, and like, I want to have a look at kind of a communist's reaction to Donald Trump. All right, so like, we're going to be looking at this hopefully from the perspective of someone that's got like a Marxist analysis of the world. Not just like a general lefty analysis. I'm really more keen to see someone like, you know, put their Marxist hat on, put their, I guess, yeah, their anti-capitalist hat on, and like, look at what they see as kind of Trump's victory and like what Trump's going to do moving forward. Like, I'm interested to see what these people have to say. So, a communist response to Trump's election, organized for revolution. This is from the Revolutionary Communists of America. So it'll be interesting to see. This came up on my feed. So like, you know, it does seem like they are calling for revolution. Hey, that's nice. It's nice. And like, let's see what they actually have to say about like Trump.
Thank you very much. Wow.
Trump has once again won the election. But is it really a surprise after the last 4 years of misery and decline, of bloody wars funded by the billions by US imperialism around the world, of the worst cost of living crisis in 40 years? We knew going into this race that neither Trump nor Kamala was opposed to Israel's genocidal slaughter of the Palestinians, that neither party represented the interests of the working class, that neither party had an alternative or a solution for the climate catastrophe or racist police terror, that neither had a solution to raise the standard of living for the vast majority, the working class of the United States. We knew that going in. So no, we're not surprised at this result. The liberal media is presenting this as a major shift to the right, but it's not. Not only did a majority of voters in 8 states cast a ballot to protect abortion rights, but the exit polls show the shift is an expression of class anger over the conditions of declining capitalist society. 2/3 of voters say the economy is doing bad. People are angry. 73% are dissatisfied or angry about the direction of the country. And yet somehow the liberals are incapable of understanding why are Americans so angry? Because they live in a bubble, in a different world. The columnists of the New York Times, the strategists of the Democratic Party, the Manhattan offices that are running the mass media of this country can't seem to understand why Americans are so mad. The Democratic Party has spent the last...
Actually, like, I must admit, like... So it's not a very complimentary frame. I've stopped you on there, my friend. But, like, I just have to interject. Like, there is a lot of talk about, like, how everything's going to the right and stuff like that. And, like, you know, that is one analysis of it. And that's apt. However, I think it's more of a kind of... It's a sign that people are angry. And, like, people are angry in terms of, like, working class people are angry. Like, they're worried about, like, he was talking about, like, cost of living crisis going on. He's talking about, like, living standards that have dropped. And, like, you know, kind of the things that people thought they were going to take for granted, like secure work forms and, like, all of that sort of stuff, that has been slowly and, like, more dramatically, I guess, recently, like, degraded and eroded. Especially since kind of 2008 and then the pandemic. So, like, people are angry, and I think that it's a good observation to not, like, kind of make this overarching analysis of that being that, oh my god, this is a turn, just like people are going more and more right wing, and, like, be all worried about, like, some type of right wing world that we're descending into. It really should also be analyzed from the sense that people are angry, like the working class is angry, and, like, in a bourgeois political system where you divide everything into bloody left and right, and, like, if at this point in history the right are more reflective of, like, the discontent that people have, then people are going to associate more with the right. That doesn't mean people are overwhelmingly right-wing, but, like, if that's the outlet that kind of captures their frustrations, then so be it. If it was the left at some point, then, like, you know, people would, you know, tend to move in that direction. But, like, what this is an indictment on the entire bourgeois political system at large. That, like, if you give people basically two options and they're all pissed off and upset about something, and, like, there is really only one option that is expressing that properly, then they're going to be jumping on board with that. Like, that's one real observation I think that everyone can agree on from, like, you know, the American election, is that, like, the Harris campaign was lackluster and it failed to meet the demands of average people in America. Like, there was a graph that I was looking at before that was like given to me by Jerry Poppins, and, like, it basically shows that, like, in the 2020 election, like, how many people came out to vote for the Democrats, which would have been, like, a mobilization effort on their part because they didn't want Trump in again, so they all got out and they voted. But, like, this time there were less people that voted overall compared to the 2020 election. So that means they failed, the Democrats, really, to mobilize the same people that voted Trump out last time. They just didn't get them anywhere near the polls this time, and Trump made, like, absolutely killed it in this regard. And so, like, not only is this a reflection then of all those people that are just angry working class people that are now turning right wing and stuff like that, it's also kind of like a sign that the people that usually have kind of more left wing ideals were just like, I'm not even getting involved this time. Like, they are that dissatisfied with the system, they're just like, I'm out, I don't want to play anymore, kind of thing. That's a crazy position to be at politically. So, like, I think that's a really good point from our old commie buddy over here.
4 years gaslighting the public, saying the mass media of this country can't seem to understand why Americans are so mad. The Democratic Party has spent the last 4 years gaslighting the public, saying everything is going great. People should really be thankful to Biden. And they've been aided in this campaign of misinformation and gaslighting by the soft left and the so-called democratic socialists in the Democratic Party, like AOC, who after Biden's horrible debate performance this summer, said he was the most successful president in modern US history. You know, Bernie Sanders 8 years ago came onto the scene of the political arena, tapping into that discontent, promising a revolution against the billionaire class. And then he capitulated again and again to the Democratic Party. Sanders now, after spending this entire campaign pushing people into Kamala's corner, saying we have to vote for the lesser evil, has come out and said it's no surprise that millions of workers have abandoned the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party abandoned the working class. Well, that's really rich coming from a candidate who in 2016 backed the Democrats, who in 2020 backed Joe Biden, who has now been backing Kamala Harris, saying we have to support them, we have to support what is actually a party of Wall Street, a party of the billionaires, a party that represents the establishment and all the ruling institutions. It is the party of the American ruling class. Sanders has been back.
Look, I'm not on for like Sanders bashing, to be honest. Like, you know, he's doing whatever. I think this is my opinion on Sanders. He's doing whatever he can within the political framework. Like, obviously he's going to have to endorse political leaders of the Democratic Party. Like, honestly. But like, I'm pretty sure this time, like, he's gone for Senate and he won his seat, and he's done it as an independent. So he's actually shown what this guy has failed to say yet. He might pick it up later, but like, he's actually failed. He's actually shown that he's like, at this stage of his career, he's just like, screw it, I'm out of the Democratic Party, and he's going to do whatever he can as a senator, and like, I guess, make statements that align with his actual political views, which I would say are more socialist than bourgeois left-leaning. That's just my opinion or my take on it. But like, this guy's making out like, you know, Bernie Sanders like had kind of really any choice to do something otherwise than not just be a puppet of the Democratic Party and have to kiss the ring of all of these people. Like, he was still part of the Democratic Party. Like, what did you expect he was going to do? Like, honestly.
Backing it and now says this party has abandoned the working class. Well, it was never a working class party to begin with. The lesson of the last 4 years is that you cannot fight Trump with lesser evilism. You can only fight Trumpism with communism, with class war, with a perspective that understands and explains the anger of the working class, because that anger is very real, and it's a result of the decline of the capitalist system. It's the duty of communists to provide a backbone, ideological clarity for that struggle. The backbone of the soft left has been inexistent and has been completely incapable of providing an alternative or tapping into the mood. But the majority of society recognizes that both parties represent other classes.
How are you? I hope I'm saying this right, but beta or better? Let's go with beta. You can tell me in the chat if you like my pronunciation. I hope you can hear me as well, because there was a problem with the audio, I think, on your end last time. So welcome to the chat. Welcome to the live stream. We are just going through, like, trying to kind of dissect as to and get an understanding of what the hell Trump is going to do, I guess, over the next 4 years, and we're trying to get some like varying perspectives on that. No worries. Thank you. Yeah, we're just trying to get some understanding on possibly where it is that Trump is going to take the world, what type of ride he's going to take the world on over the next 4 years. And like, right now we're looking at an American revolutionary communist party's perspective on that, and like, he's come out with some gold, but like, they're always a little bit kind of, you know, they're a little bit coarse in the way they analyze things, because like, obviously they're going to push their communist kind of agenda at every turn and make sure people understand the importance of being a commie through and through. Do you have Patreon, like support your channel, a place we can send money? Oh, wow. Yes. I haven't done a plug yet. Yeah, sorry. I should have done a couple of plugs just to let people know. If you have a look at the description, thank you for asking, by the way. But like, yeah, if you have a look at the description, in the description, I have a link to my Patreon. So I have basically set up a system over there where there's like kind of different tiers of access. Well, basically it's just different tiers of financial support. All I'm trying to do over in Patreon is kind of set up some type of community where we can have chats over there in a more direct fashion. Like YouTube, obviously you're a slave to the algorithm, so like some people get my notifications and some people don't, so I can't really communicate with people very well. Like, you know, we've been talking in comments and sometimes I get notifications of your comments, Beta, and then sometimes I don't. So like I can't always contact you or communicate with you properly. But like on Patreon, every time someone comments on something, I get an email notification. Every time I comment on stuff that you do, I'm pretty sure you get email notifications as well. So I want to start a community over there, like a one that we can communicate better. So I've been asking people to go over there and join and like become a member for free. But like, you know, if you can support financially, that would be great. So there is a link to my Patreon in the description. If you can't use the link or something, let me know in the chat and I'll fix that for you. But I hope it's working. I'm pretty sure it is working. But like, yeah, let's get back to our commie friend over here. And like, I think he makes a good point though about like this idea that the Democratic Party has abandoned the working class. One is like stupid because they were never a party of the working class. They did do a lot of reform and stuff like that through significant points in history, like in the 60s or the 70s and things like that, that would have like, you know, lended themselves to working class interests, but they've never been a working class party. America has never had a working class party like a lot of other liberal democratic societies all around the Western world. So like in Australia we have a Labour Party, like a lot of like European countries have actual socialist parties that are really in the actual political race. But like America has never had that, and like they've never had that on purpose because their oligarchy would never let that happen, like let's be honest. But like, you know, he's harping on about how like they've abandoned the working class, and like, yeah, they have. And like, you know what, who hasn't, or who not abandoned, like, but you know who's picked up on that working class sentiment is the Republicans, but specifically through Trumpism, people like to call it.
Class interests than their own. In this election, it was reported that for the first time, the number of self-identified independents is higher than the number of self-identified Democrats. But even that is an understatement of the real mood of rejection against the two parties in society. Another poll said that 63% of Americans don't feel represented by either party and would rather have a mass alternative. This is the reason that we are not afraid of Trump. There were some who said it's going to be easier to organize under Kamala than it will under Trump. Well, ask the students at the Gaza Solidarity encampments whether it was easier for them when they were being brutally arrested and beat up and tear gassed by police that were sent in by Democratic administrations or Republican administrations. It makes no difference. The thing that makes it harder to organize is when you have confused ideas of lesser evilism, of class collaboration, rather than a clear strategy of class independence. We're not sad about the results. We're not scared. We're not running and hiding. We are ready to fight. We are angry, just like millions of working class people are angry. This system will not turn around. There is no great revival on the horizon. There is no second post-war boom that Trump is going to bring about. His promises are going to be betrayed and his base is going to be let down. And then they're going to be looking for an alternative. There are millions of young people, advanced workers and youth, who recognize that the capitalist system is the source of their problems. There is a communist generation.
Now, what he means by advanced youth there is interesting. Okay, so like there's this idea in kind of communist organization that like there is levels of class consciousness within the working class. So, you know, you have people that are like kind of proletariat, let's say. So the people that are like the working class, so they're involved with capitalist production somehow. So they're employed through capitalists, through major corporations, in like various sectors. It doesn't have to be like this antiquated idea of like industrial production where everyone works in a factory. You could work in the tourism sector, you could work in hospitality, you could work in manufacture. Like, it doesn't just have to do with like everybody working in a factory setting or something like that. So like there's the proletariat, which are these people, these wage workers who, you know, they take in less money than the value that they are producing for their capitalist rulers. So they're the boss basically, and like that's the basis for the entire profit system. Now, the more that people kind of get involved with this style of work, there is a sense that they developed an understanding of the problems of that system. So like basically, like if you've ever heard of people going on strike for better conditions, right? You know deep down when you go to work in one of these types of institutions, where there's a large, like there's a workforce versus like management and the boss and etc. Like everything that the boss and management, their decisions really comes down to making workers more productive and like squeezing their wages and stuff like that. And you know, having conditions in the workplace which make the workers produce more value, i.e. making them more profit, and they don't really care too much about the workers. In the modern system, like it's a little bit different. Yes, people like kind of are a little bit more considerate because there's laws involved, like, you know, work health safety measures, and like there's HR departments in the modern world, etc., etc. But like for the most part, like there is a stark difference between the interests of the capitalist, so like the boss, the business owners, the shareholders, and those of the workers. Like workers want better conditions, they want better wages, and the other end, the capitalists, they want profit. They want, you know, their business to be more and more successful so they can become more and more powerful within the capitalist system. So those divergent interests mean that there is a level of consciousness that develops on both sides. The capitalists are very class conscious. We pretend like it's only the workers that are conscious and stuff like that. That is wrong. It is not the way that the world works at all. I'll just tell you that much for free. But like as the working class sees this type of issue, this contradiction, this disparity in interests going on, they start to develop themselves. So let's say they go on a strike and they realize that, like, you know, their interests need to be protected, so they unionize, or maybe that leads to them getting involved in some type of political scene because like they want to make sure that like any of the wins that they get in their own workplace are also represented somehow politically, so they get involved with like a political party that represents that too. Like as that like consciousness develops, then you have kind of certain levels of the working class that are more attuned to the problems of the capitalist system than others. And so like the proletariat, there are certain people that are like kind of more highly attuned to the problems of capitalism than others that are, but they're all proletarians. And so like they're all working people, but like, yes, like I said, some are just have a heightened level of consciousness than the other. What was the exact term that he used? Are advanced workers and youth. So these advanced minds, they start to read theory. Like look at his bookshelf. Look at everything behind him. He's really trying. Would be an advanced member of the working class because he's put in all of the effort, not just to be politically involved, but he's also educating himself on the history of worker struggle and how the capitalist system works. And so you have people that are more advanced and more conscious within the entirety of the working class movement. Now, someone like Lenin, right? His idea was to have a vanguard. So a vanguard is like a section of the working class who understands capitalism, who gets the nature of the issue, and is more than happy, basically, to use their understanding to kind of form a group a centralized kind of group within the working class to help educate everybody else and drive the working class towards its revolutionary potential. And that's why he's talking about the advanced workers. There are millions of young people and advanced workers and youth out there, so people that actually are starting to, they understand how capitalism is a problem and it's full of contradictions, and like they are learning and like taking it upon themselves to try and get a better get an even better understanding of the problems with capitalism, so they can push forward and fight for the interests of the working class in a revolutionary manner. Okay, so like there is fighting for the interests of the working class by like just at your local level, just unionizing, getting better conditions in your workplace. That's not going to change the capitalist system though. Yeah, that is reactionary at best. You're reacting to the scene in front of you. But like to be revolutionary is beyond that. It is to understand, okay, this is the capitalist system, and like we can get some wins on the board here, but they will only be, forever ephemeral in the capitalist system. And so we must make sure that we change the capitalist system itself. And so that's why this person is going to be starting to speak about like how these people are ultimately a revolutionary force in society, because they are seeing that like the two-party system means nothing, left and right really means nothing. What you really need to be is revolutionary.
That the capitalist system is the source of their problems. There is a communist generation here in the United States of young people that want to see the overthrow of capitalism in our lifetime. If that's you, if you're a communist, then this is your party. Join the Revolutionary Communists of America, and let's gather these millions who want to see a revolution in our lifetime into a party that can carry out that task. The years ahead are going to be chaotic. They're going to be turbulent. Things are not going to get easier and smoother and calmer. On the contrary, we are entering the most turbulent period of US history, a period of class struggle like we have never seen before. We have to prepare urgently.
I think there is a really good kind of point there, that like I would argue that a lot of the class consciousness in the global north countries are part of the labor aristocracy, but I don't think that that is a pejorative term. It's our job to develop solidarity. It's important to develop dual power. I would argue that a lot of the class consciousness in global north are part of the labor aristocracy. I think so too. Like there's obviously like there's always this disparaging critique of like kind of communist and Marxist leftists today from people like, you know, Jordan Peterson and co. And they talk about like kind of how it's just like these entitled college educated kids and stuff like that, who you would say is part of kind of the labor aristocracy in the modern age, because like, you know, they've come from middle class settings, and so they're able to take themselves off to college and get educated and then learn how horrible capitalism is, and then they want to like, you know, express themselves in that way. And so like what you're saying is right for IS. I agree as well. It's not a pejorative term. It's just it's an objective analysis. It's like a concrete reality that like labor aristocracy is actually a phenomenon. It is a thing where like working people have won rights, and they've become used to enjoying the fruits of that struggle. Then like they're less likely to be revolutionary, and so they become a form of labor aristocracy, as opposed to, or in contradiction to, the original form of labor out there in the time of Marx and the early Industrial Revolution, which was completely exploited and had absolutely no rights at all. And so like, yeah, I think there's a good point there. Like, I think there's come a turning point where even the labor aristocracy now doesn't like, let's just look at the way that the welfare state has been completely degraded thanks to the rise of and the control of neoliberalism. Even the labor aristocracy is no longer safe. And so if you have this re-emergence where the labor aristocracy has kind of lived in a world where it's enjoyed the fruits of labor, and now that it's been torn away from it, then like the labor aristocracy can be wielded like this kind of advanced section of the working class, this vanguard that Leninists or Lenin would have talked about. extensively in his work. So there is hope, and I don't think it should be used as a pejorative anymore, because like, you know, this isn't the early 1900s anymore. Here we are in the 21st century, and I think like the best thing that you've said there is we need to develop solidarity. We need to link between this labor aristocracy, let's call it, and like the broader working class. Like a lot of Trump's kind of supporters are disillusioned working class people who think that like kind of just making America great again, like, you know, bringing industrialization back to America, and kind of like, yeah, entering into some type of a trade war with China and like getting the Europeans to pay for their own stuff is going to be the answer that makes them all like, you know, labor aristocracy again, and so they can go back to a simpler time where they just enjoy the fruits of their capitalist system. But like capitalism, because of its contradictions and the way that it expands, it's not going to just go back to that golden era of like, you know, post World War II, where there was like a redistribution of wealth and like the middle class was happy and like people kind of like they lived in an era of prosperity, especially in America. And like unless there's some like crazy event like World War II or something like that, like we aren't there anymore. We aren't in a situation where like wealth is equally distributed throughout the capitalist system and like people will enjoy that luxurious kind of lifestyle, like rich or poor or something like that. That's not going to happen anymore. We've returned to levels of inequality that like rival, if not like overtake like the Gilded Age. So like the time in human history where we had, you know, like kind of these oil barons that like, you know, that lived in such luxury and opulence and controlled so much of like, you know, whole nations' economies, and completely subjugated working people into a life of misery and servitude. Like we are back to those levels of income and wealth inequality. It's quite spectacular. It's just that we have all of the mod cons now, and we have certain expectations from this labor aristocracy. And so like we need to basically use like kind of the tools that we have in front of us from a historical materialist's perspective. We need to play the game that's in front of us. And like if the middle class is disillusioned, and like Trump is able to pick up on that, like we should be learning from that. We should be learning lessons from his campaign strategy and how he's able to mobilize large sections of the middle class, large sections of the working class in order to get his own political power, but like using that for means that are actually conducive to changing the capitalist system and like changing a world that is built around the profit motive only, as opposed to just letting kind of this rogue like capture all of the working class interests out there just to feed his own ends. Because like maybe he will come out with like a few good things, but like a majority of the things that he stands for are nefarious. And so like, yeah, if he gets a few good wins on the board, that's something that's probably better than any of the establishment politicians will do. But like at the end of the day, can you really trust what he's going to do as a politician in a bourgeois system? And so like, yeah, I think it's a really good point that you've made for IS. And like class consciousness is the BL and end all. And it's the reason why like I started like, you know, a YouTube channel and all that sort of stuff. Like I was trying to think about like what contribution that I could have to the movement, and like, you know, there's like the forms of struggle available to the working class, you know, the economic struggle, so like getting involved in strikes and all that sort of stuff, and the political struggle, so that's like waking up to your political power as an individual, as a member of the working class, and fighting for your class interests. And like I could have done that by forming a political party or joining some type of party that like represents my interests, or I could help spread the word and educate people about the problems of the system and what we can do next. And like I chose to do that. Like social media is a force to be reckoned with in this age, and I think I can help spread the word somehow. And like that's why you're here. watching this, if you are watching this. And so we're going to do that. We're going to spread this class consciousness. So I want to turn to, do another very sharp turn now and look at kind of what Musk's involvement, talking about capitalist interests, right, compared to the interests of the working class. You have Trump has aligned himself with one of the biggest and most popular capitalists of our time, the enigma who is Elon Musk. And I think this piece of content might give us a window into how Trump will be using his relations with Elon Musk. Because Elon Musk is supposedly going to be some type of savior on government. He's going to come in there and make the whole government machine more efficient. That's what he's been tasked to do. And so he supported Trump from the get-go because he was going to be Elon Musk's vehicle, Elon Musk was going to use Trump as a vehicle to get what he wants in terms of a capitalist, in terms of his capitalist interests. But Trump was going to conversely use his popularity to help him win a term, to get back in for his second term. And also he's going to use, I guess, his capitalist mindset to try and, shake up the government in America. And I guess we'll see kind of what the Wall Street Journal has to say about how Elon Musk is going to be used by Trump, because I think it's really good to see how he's going straight to the source. Trump, he's just going straight for capitalists, the biggest capitalist in the world, and like I said, one that's very popular, to try and shake up the government machine. And try to get it working again in capital's interest, to try and save the capitalist system from itself. It's very Marxian. It's very interesting.
No government ever voluntarily reduces itself in size. So government programs once launched never disappear. Actually, a government bureau is the nearest thing to eternal life we'll ever see on this earth.
More from Ronald Reagan shortly. 40 years later, this from Donald Trump at the Economic Club of New York on September 5th.
I will create a government efficiency commission tasked with conducting a complete financial and performance audit of the entire federal government and making recommendations for drastic reforms.
The former president wants Elon Musk to head up the commission. It's a very good idea and deserves more attention.
As the first order of business, this commission will develop an action plan to totally eliminate fraud and improper payments within 6 months. This will save trillions of dollars, trillions.
Trillions is a stretch, but there's no doubt a huge amount of money that could be saved merely by fixing loopholes in programs that invite fraud.
Instead of the 87,000 IRS agents going after middle America, let's go after the hundreds of billions of dollars of COVID fraud that we know exist.
The government paid tens of billions of dollars in fraudulent unemployment benefits and paycheck protection grants during the pandemic. According to the Internal Revenue Service, in one instance, a California prison inmate allegedly claimed more than $550 million in COVID-era employee retention tax credits.
It's remarkable that a gang member serving a life sentence for murder in state prison could orchestrate not one, but 2 criminal schemes designed to make money for himself and his co-conspirators.
It certainly is, but the ERTC will no doubt continue to add to the deficit with dubious payouts, and there are countless other programs that run on autopilot with little evidence that they yield any results.
And liftoff. Go Starlink, go DTC.
With SpaceX, Mr. Musk has demonstrated how a private business can do better than NASA in sending rockets into space. He's seen the waste and inefficiency of government firsthand, and he could no doubt call on many people from the private economy to help.
And Elon, because he's not very busy, has agreed to head that task force.
The shame is that the US hasn't taken a detailed look at the routine follies of government in decades.
I am pleased to present to you, Mr. President, with the private sector's survey's summary report. And with your weightlifting, that is not too heavy, but otherwise...
The last serious look at government was the Grace Commission, established by Ronald Reagan in the 1980s.
Oh, I was just going to say, Ed, you read these this afternoon, I'll take them tonight.
Okay, so this is the thing about Musk. This is the the efficiency commission. So they're going to be looking at like this. You could take this two ways, in my opinion. Okay, if you look at this, like what are the two contradictory elements that are going on here? This is an opportunity for a capitalist. A capitalist. He is. That's all. That's exactly what Musk is. To take a business perspective and basically a knife to the government sector, the federal government sector, and just start carving out things that are inefficient. So let's just say that a service is deemed inefficient for some reason, even though it's a sufficient service. If it's not, on the paper stacking up like in the lens of someone with, kind of a business outlook would see, they'll just start cutting back on services. This is a problem, I think, for like society generally, where they just start to. Hello again, welcome back. No need to apologize. Welcome back to the chat. We're talking about Elon Musk now. Elon is going to be at the head of, apparently, an efficiency commission to cut back on government services that are, basically inefficient and costing the federal government, according to Trump, trillions and trillions of dollars, kind of thing. So this is the intention with like having Elon Musk come in. He's got a business insider kind of look at things. He understands how a business works efficiently, and they're going to start running the government like a business. Now, so many people have tried to do this. This was the exact neoliberal ethos. Is just I'm not having to. It's loud enough. Look, I did listen to my tech guy, 4IS. Who just asked me to turn up a couple of parameters, like on the browser as well as my own microphone. So I think I might have fixed the sound thing. So thank you for bringing it to my attention. If the sound drops out at all, please let me know. Like I said, I'm still getting used to this whole live streaming thing. So any tech help would be great. So Elon is going to put that kind of business perspective on government. And like I said, we've looked at all this sort of stuff before with privatization and all that sort of stuff. It's not new to come in and gut out the government service and things like that because private industry does it better. The difference here is instead of just gutting out the government services, don't worry about it. Better is just a random name, but my name is Beatrice. Well, welcome. Welcome, Beatrice. So Elon Musk, I heard about the Neuralink chips. Yeah, that's some scary stuff, Neuralink. Maybe I will do a separate live stream just on AI. Because from a Marxist perspective and an analysis of capitalism and stuff like that, AI is literally the most incredible and scariest stuff ever. It can be two wonderful and bewildering things at the same time, and AI is that. And yeah, the Neuralink stuff, it just frightens me, to be honest. Obviously its potential is incredible. Syncing yourself with AI would give you the amazing intelligence power of of an entire large language model, which would be incredible, right? But what would that actually mean for humanity if we were all plugged in and we had something that was continually reading our biometric data, our brain waves and our body non-stop? That is some crazy independence that we're handing over to a machine, allowing it to become one with our body. And I heard this really interesting analogy, and I'll just leave you with this until we actually do a live stream just for this. But here was the analogy, right? You have an artificial intelligence, maybe an agent, maybe it's general artificial intelligence. I wouldn't trust to have a chip inside my brain. Imagine you're just chilling and then all of a sudden you hear a voice, Neuralink update is now available. Yeah, I know, right? All right. But and the update is it kind of takes over and like you have no idea what it's going to be doing next. But like, yeah, think of it like this: AI, right? Like whether it's general intelligence or like, you know, you've got some type of agent in your brain that kind of makes decisions because it's like it's doing its job, let's say. Now imagine if we as a human, like we are much more intelligent than a fly, right? And like for somehow a fly created Neuralink or something like that and got our human intelligence. So you were captured as an intelligent being and put into a fly, and your job was to help that fly find the next rubbish bin so it could go feast on. Imagine your intelligence and like how dissatisfied you would be as an intelligent being just flying around all day telling this fly what garbage to eat next, because you were so much smarter than the fly and you could figure out where all the garbage bins were, you know, good proximity. And like your whole life now would just be like helping this fly get around and eat rubbish. Like you would be completely dissatisfied. So the question is, if like you allow something into your head, a super intelligent being, you know, whether that's general AI or like just kind of a narrow form of AI but still has agency, why the hell would it be satisfied with just doing whatever the hell you want to do? It's super intelligent. It could do all of these things. It could do multiple things. Like, why would it just sit along and take a back seat in your mind? Why would it not take control or want to do other things that are well beyond your capacity as a human? I'll leave you with that thought experiment. You think about that, and like we'll have a whole kind of AI live stream or series of them because there's just so much to go with. But like back to Musk, I'm worried about like a business-minded person coming in and gutting out the government service. We've been here before. It's a neoliberal tactic, you know, right back to like the day dot, you know, you privatize things. However, they're not privatizing things. He's going to be doing it from the inside just with like an efficiency mindset. So like that could be good. Like there could be a lot of decrepit kind of systems in there that have become just like, you know, part of the woodwork that just need an update and need to be refreshed, and like deservedly so need to be gutted out. Like they're like, you know, government, like let's not be honest. Like, let's not lie here. Let's be honest. Government is full of that type of stuff. Bureaucracy is full of that stuff where people like get into positions that they shouldn't be there. Like they don't even have anything real to do. They don't even know what they're doing. And so like there's always government efficiencies that can be like then can be made and can be improved upon. So like let's not lie there. There's benefit to a system like this. But like, you know, you just have to understand that like these guys have an agenda. Trump has an agenda. So as long as that agenda aligns somehow with the general population and makes this like government more efficient, then fantastic. But like it really is just to like gut people out and take away government services, like that won't bode well in the end for the people of America. But like, you know, I'm kind of safe over here from this type of policy decision in Australia, because if they gut out their own services, like it's not going to affect anyone in Australia.
Led by American industrialist J. Peter Grace, it made more than 2,000 recommendations to save $424 billion over 3 years. That's in 1984 dollars too. And $115 billion would be saved by the administration immediately without Congress.
These 2,478 cost-cutting, revenue-enhancing recommendations can not only significantly reduce the size of our federal deficit, but can be achieved without raising taxes, without weakening America's needed defense buildup, without in any way harming necessary social welfare programs, and finally, without the need to further study opportunities to cut costs and reduce the deficit.
Bill Clinton, in his new Democrat phase, tried some...
I don't trust anyone like that. Like, you know, Reagan, right? The like poster boy of neoliberalism. Like he just went in there and gutted out government services and privatized things. So like if they're gonna just do what he's done in the past, like I'm worried about that. But like, you know, if they, like I said, if they can make government more efficient, all for it. There's a lot of fat to be trimmed out of government services. Yeah, it's scary stuff.
Something similar by appointing then Vice President Al Gore on a mission to, quote, reinvent government.
Today I am sending to Congress a significant package of spending cuts totaling $10 billion based on the National Performance Review. and fulfilling a promise I made to further reduce the deficit by spending cuts in that amount, spending cuts in that amount to Congress that could be passed in this calendar year.
It did some good, such as proposing a reform of federal air traffic control.
These cuts are part of our commitment to put our economic house in order.
But the Clinton administration abandoned the effort.
Yes, deficit. It's interesting terminology. Like a deficit is like just the difference between kind of what your income is and what your expenditure is. Like 4IS is still on there. Here's our resident accountant. And so there is a difference between debt. So like if you spend kind of money as a government, right, money that you don't have, and so you borrow money to pay for, like, let's say infrastructure or something like that, that's a debt, because you're going to have to pay back that debt to the person or the entity that you borrowed the money from to pay for that infrastructure, and that debt comes with an interest, so that's all factored in the debt. A deficit is more along the lines of, as I said before, kind of you're doing spending, or you've got expenditure, things that you're needing to buy as a government or spend money on, and like you've got money coming in, and the deficit would be the difference between that expenditure and your income, basically. Like I said, 4AS, please, my resident accountant, jump in with anything, but like that's the concept, basically. Whoops.
Effort amid union opposition and Mr. Gore's desire to appeal to his party's left as he sought the presidential nomination in 2000.
For the same service that you have right now, trillions of dollars is wasted and gone, and nobody knows where it went.
A federal leviathan that now commands nearly 25% of the US economy and extends its reach into every corner of American life is in
No worries, you are welcome. You're welcome.
desperate need of reform. The pro-democratic press will scoff, and even some conservatives will claim that nothing could be done without reform of Social Security and Medicare. But as we wait for the fiscal crisis that may be required to galvanize entitlement reform, there is plenty that could be done to cut spending and reduce government waste.
One of my favorite stories about government had to do with an employee who sat at a desk, and papers came to his desk. He read them and determined where they were to go and initialed them and sent them on. And one day a classified document came there, but it came to him, so he read it, initialed it, and sent it on. 24 hours later, it came back to him with a note attached that said, "You weren't supposed to see this. Erase your initials and initial the erasure."
No government ever. Evil. Ha 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 ha. Yeah, like you can't really get too much from, like, you know, people that just hate government to start with, and like that was definitely the neoliberal attitude at the time. Out of topic, but do you think that communism is radical? Ooh. I guess it depends how you define what radical means. That's a really interesting question. I like it. Like, radical is kind of anything that is outside of what is acceptable to the current culture. Okay, so to be radical in a religious sense is to like take a very extreme interpretation of like your religious rules and your religious teachings, and to take that to the extreme level. So a radical might be someone in a religious sense that like takes the teachings of their religious document and interprets them to mean that anyone who is not part of the religion needs to be cleansed, and so then you would go on some type of rampage and kill anyone who's not part of your religious sect. And so like it's a kind of, you could say that's a radical version or interpretation of like kind of that system of belief. Radical is measured in comparison to the baseline or accepted center of thinking. Thank you very much, Jerry Poppins. I used your graph as a reference earlier, Jerry Poppins, so thanks for just trying to paint the picture about like how weird the disparity was between like how many people voted in 2020 in terms of Democrats compared to this time. So like what does that really mean? for IS, I find radical is used in a pejorative by liberals and conservatives. Yes. So if you think about like the word radical is associated with extreme, like how I was using it, because like people are discouraged from being radical. Like people don't like to think that there are people outside that would push the boundaries of what's acceptable in society's eyes at that point. But like you must think of it like this, that like being radical is not a problem, because there would be no change to the way a society operates if people weren't on the edges pushing the boundaries and like trying to drive for some type of change. So being radical is essential. Like obviously there are extremes of everything, and so like you have to take it with a grain of salt. And so like this is like the kind of dialectical thing that happens within any society. You have like kind of two opposing forces, and they for the most part keep each other in check. However, as they're struggling between them, there should be a progress made in one direction or the other. And so if we're looking at like communism being radical, that's the original question, then yes, it is. It is extremely radical, because like we live in a capitalist system. Okay, and like basically in a nutshell, like I've done another live stream about this like last week I think, and like to try and explain what capitalism is. But like capitalism in a nutshell is a relation between capital, so like capital as an idea, and labor as an idea. So not laborers exactly, or capitalists exactly, but it's a relationship between, like I said, capital and labor, these ideas. So capital is this thing that like it could be money, it could be any type of good that like sets, like that is in motion, it's moving around the world, it's circulating, doing certain things, and like puts other things into motion. And capital, so like money generally, puts labor into motion. So like capital invested into something, capital in the forms of like goods like oil or gold or some other type of resource, or capital in the form of machinery, so like a production line or a chainsaw or something like that. Capital puts labor into motion. So like capital invested in something gets labor working and using machines and using resources and using its skill and its knowledge. Like it uses labor to produce new values for society. And so if that's all that capitalism is like this relation between capital floating around, circulating everywhere, and putting labor into motion to make value that everyone feeds off and makes the entire society go round and provides the economic basis for everything else to speak, like to refract off that, like politics and art and culture and language and like our institutions, our governments, all that sort of stuff comes off this baser relation between capital and labor. Then communism is completely radical, like completely radical, because communism seeks to get rid of that idea that there is like a relation where capital kind of controls labor, basically. Because communism, in its essence, is about getting rid of classes in society. So the classic class relation in capitalism is that capitalists exploit labor or laborers. So capitalists engage workers to make value, and they pay them a certain amount, much less than the value they create, and that exploitation there is the basis for all of their profits. And so that is a class relation between those two. Communism, like in its final form, is all about this getting rid of any type of class relation. And like communism will do that by making sure that like all those things we described before as capital, so the money, the machines, all of the resources, everything that labor uses to make value, all of those things, all that capital is not owned by private individuals anymore, by businesses or people that have like, property rights over things. Communism is about getting rid of that class system and just saying, okay, all of the laborers out there, all the people that put machinery and resources and their skill into motion to make value, they should control it. That's it. That's what communism is in a nutshell. So you don't have the capitalist anymore versus the laborer, them standing apart as separate entities. You just have labor and all of the resources, machinery, and all the goods out there that create all the value. So like laborers decide what they want to do. The labor relation is the thing that decides for itself what to produce in terms of value. So that would completely change society right then and there. Like the way that society is functioning and how it works right now. So yeah, communism is like so radical, like so radical, compared to like what we have today, that like it's something that people can't even conceive of. They can't even understand inside their mind how that would work. So like the idea, I think, of communism is extremely radical. This is why that people need to read Hannah Arendt's On Civil Disobedience. I haven't read it. Fair enough. I've heard people quote it a bit. It's how their constitution came about. Civil disobedience, great revolutionary change, civil rights movement. Yeah, like a lot of change comes from radicals. Like, you know, thinking that like black people and white people can go to the same toilet or sit wherever they want on a bus. Like that was considered radical at some point. That's a good point for us. Do you think that class from a cultural standpoint could be entrenched in how we've interacted and evolved as a species, to be changed? And that's why it's not understood. Do you think class from a cultural standpoint could be too entrenched in how we've interacted and evolved as a species? That's a good question. Something that I've really grappled with and tried to contemplate as well. Now, I would say that culturally, class does become ingrained in the human psyche. Okay, so like, let's just use as an example, because it's always so much easier to understand how this works when you've got something to actually relate to. Now, prior to, you know, us living in free societies, so like in democracies and under a capitalist kind of relation and a capitalist system, we lived in like feudal societies. So we had societies that were based on like there being an actual aristocracy, like a king and an upper class, and then like everybody else. And so like if you were like, whether you were like a peasant or a merchant or a lawyer or like even in the middle class or something like that, or you're a townsperson or you lived on a farm, if you weren't in the aristocracy, you didn't have certain birthrights. You couldn't own land. You didn't have rights to anything. If you weren't the king, you didn't have birthrights. So there was an actual class distinction there that you could really tell. Like, people that were nobles were like literally better than everyone else. Everyone else was scum. Like they just didn't have rights or anything like that. And before that you had a tribe leader. Was that not without perks? No, you had tribal leaders, but I would say that they were way more democratic. Like, you know, if people didn't like if the whole tribe didn't like their tribe leader, that person wasn't going to be tribe leader for very long. But in like the kind of the medieval world that we progressed from and turned into capitalism, it didn't matter if the aristocracy were decrepit and incestuous and just absolutely horrible for that society. They had birthright. They were aristocracy. They were nobles. They were better people by birthright. And like the reason I was painting that picture is because that was so ingrained in human society. Even the people at the bottom believed in that system, like wholeheartedly. Humans had lived in that way of life for so many hundreds of years, so many generations, that was just normal. Like if you went into the military service, right, aristocrats and nobles got higher positions in the military, and all of the working class people that were, that had to go and serve in the military and served in the Napoleonic Wars and all that sort of stuff. Like they truly believed that they were taking orders of people that were aristocrats and nobles and from a higher level of society. And so they would listen to their orders because they believed that they were better people. And so this was ingrained. Now, fast forward to now, 21st century. Everybody's eyes are equal under the law. Everybody is an individual. Everyone is special. We're all like born, like when we're born, we're all on this even keel kind of thing. And like we can, due to our merits, we can be whoever we want to be. If we work hard enough, we can do anything. That is a cultural shift. That's a change in our human psyche from the days where just a few hundred years ago, people really thought that if you were a noble, if you were an aristocrat, if you were a king, you were a better person. And like you were different people, you were from different breeds. Like you couldn't even mix with these other people because they were just different from you. So like I think yes, twofold to answer your question, Jerry. Like from a cultural standpoint, things get entrenched and they become part of like what we call common sense and the human psyche, but that doesn't mean it can't change. And like I think that is exemplified in that example, that like people used to honestly believe that there were just a better class of people out there. They just existed. But now that idea that someone is just inherently better than you because they were born into the right family, that doesn't stack up today in our society. Like there's many of people that are born into one family that are geniuses or brilliant, and then the same family members like siblings or relations are complete dropkicks and are useless. And so it doesn't matter. We don't think of things like by birthright anymore. We think about the individual merits, the person themselves. They are the thing that will determine whether you have greatness, not your birthright. And so like a class system is antiquated, but in the capitalist system, people think that class is gone, and I would argue against that. I don't think class is gone at all. I think it's just come down to property rights now. So your class is defined by what you have rights over. So if you're able to accumulate lots and lots of property rights over things, so maybe it's lots of property or lots of investments or lots of intellectual property, or you claim rights over lots of things and you exclude everyone else from all of the stuff that you own and you take rights over, then like you have a lot of social power. And like that can be lost. And so like there's social mobility today, so you can move in and out of classes and stuff like that. But like, that doesn't mean the class is gone. Solid point evolution does not stop. No, it doesn't stop. And if I'm getting a solid point, ladies and gentlemen, from Jerry Poppins, who is very hard to convince on like conceptual issues like this, then like I will take that as an absolute badge of honor. Thank you for the difficult question, Jerry Poppins. I'm glad that you've enjoyed my response. I think I could literally call it a day and be very happy with that if I've gone part of the way to convincing Jerry Poppins of something. So like, Beta, I hope that answers your question somewhat. I'm glad that we've come to this kind of like more revolutionary discussion at the end of what has been a very Trump-heavy discussion. But like, it's important to kind of, I guess, have this conversation about like what Trump is going to be doing and what he means, like on the world stage. So just to recap for people that have joined kind of towards like the end of this live stream, I need to go back and rewatch that. I missed. Well, like, look, I was just going to give you a quick summary, but like basically Europe is on edge. They basically didn't plan for Trump to win. Like they've not said it in that many words, but like I can read in between the lines. They didn't see Trump really winning, or like they didn't want to, and they didn't plan for it. And what I mean by they didn't plan for it is that like Trump is turning inwards. So he's looking to protect the American economy and like basically become independent again and not rely on global trade. And Europe are seeing the writing on the wall because they know what Trump did last time and how he dealt with international diplomacy. And they are starting to talk amongst themselves about how they need to make the European Union itself resilient. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, said like they recently met up, the European Union, just after Trump was claimed victory, and he basically said there are two types of entities and powers in the world. There are herbivores and carnivores, and we are a herbivore, and we are going to be preyed upon by carnivores. So he thinks the European Union is in a weak position at the moment globally, and like he really does think that Europe needs to kind of look out for itself and its own interests in order to deal with its economic issues and its strategic issues, being Russia. And so they need to come together more tightly as a European Union to solve their problems. We went on to kind of look at like how Trump and China are going to be like kind of playing things out, and like it really does look like people are worried that like when Trump puts up his tariffs and starts like putting stuff up to take away China's ability to sell anything on American soil, and like trying to kind of detach themselves from reliance on China, that's going to start some type of trade war. So people are really worried about what the implications of the trade war is, because the trade war won't just be between China and America, okay? Like the way the capital flows around the world, it needs to circulate well, and it needs to circulate on a path of least resistance. And so like if like capital starts being held up between two superpowers, China and America, like it's going to be difficult to get that capital to move to other parts of the world to make up and compensate for that. So like a trade war between America and China is not going to just end there. A trade war between America and China is going to have implications for the world economy. It's going to screw up a lot of economies, whether that be like China or America dumping their products on other countries to make up for the war between them, or they like start to tighten up on certain things to protect themselves, and so like trade relations between China and other countries and China and America and other countries start to become strained. So like the world is bracing for an all-out trade war between the two nations. We also then had a look kind of at like Trump's 10-point plan. So this was something, I'll just show you the screenshot now. Like this is what it looked like. Trump, if you've ever seen this footage, it's coming up a bit now. It's old, it's like a year old or something like that, Trump's 10-point plan. But like basically he's speaking about all the things that he wants to do, which is like from, you know, cleaning up government and like getting rid of corruption in certain agencies, like cleaning up like basically intelligence services and stuff like that. Some massive and bold claims that he made a year ago. And so we were unpacking some of the claims that he's made, like massive claims. And like we were trying to see, like, you know, have this understanding of what he wants to do so we can predict what he will actually do next, and whether this sort of stuff comes true, all of the things that he was beating his chest and saying that he was going to do. And then we looked at like a communist perspective. So there was the American, the Revolutionary Communists of America. We looked at like kind of basically their viewpoint, and like they had this guy has a really good perspective, right? Like in terms of like, if you just look at like the political situation about like how everyone's voted for Trump in this case, and that would look on the surface, right, like people are becoming more right-wing in like the West at the moment, and like everyone's like kind of freaking out, like from like the liberals out there are freaking out, and like the soft left is freaking out because everyone's coming more and more right-wing, and with right-wing territory it becomes like authoritarianism and like, you know, the pure evils of like fascism and all that sort of stuff. But like he's saying no, it's not like everyone's just becoming more right-wing. What is happening is people are more and more pissed off with the system. They are more disillusioned. They are angry with the fact that capitalism is not serving their interests anymore. And like one of the two parties in that two-party system represented more of their frustrations than the other. And that was Trump. So like Trump represented and spoke more to working class people who were pissed off about the way the world is working at the moment. And so they voted for him because he was talking to their language. And so like I think that's a really good analysis of it. It's not that people are turning more right-wing nowadays. It's more that they are upset with what's going on. And Trump, like I said, spoke their bloody language. He appealed to the masses, and so they voted him in. And so like that is a lesson for all of us. We need to be speaking to the people, not speaking above them, not speaking for them, but speaking to them and developing their class consciousness. I think that was a really good point from him. And our commie buddies over there at the Revolutionary Communists of America. And then we had a crack at like trying to figure out like what Trump has planned for old mate Elon Musk. Actually, we're trying to figure out what he's going to do with his. Basically, Trump, so he has said in the lead up to this, is going to put Elon Musk in front of a government efficiency commission. And like my concern is with that is like when you put like business people in charge of like making government more efficient, they just slash and burn everything. And so like that ends up just cutting services, which makes the whole system even more inefficient, which compounds the problem and then like makes people have even less faith in government. And then they want to slash government even more. And it just turns into this like compounding spiral of government decay and like just throws out like any value in the governance at all. But that is not to say that you can't do government more effectively. Like there are many stories of inefficiencies in government. I know firsthand, anecdotally as well, of like many instances where there are people in government positions that like those government positions were just created for friends, or like they like literally you have people that work in government that just have no idea what they're doing. Like every day they're kind of just like, what am I going to do today? Like I don't even know why I'm here. And like you could consolidate that role into other roles. You could just make government more efficient generally. Don't get me wrong, it's a big black hole that we throw taxpayer money into. So there is the ability to make government more efficient, but like just handing it over to some capitalist to do that and giving it to kind of a right-wing party to do that, so the Republicans who are basically fiscally conservative, you know, just to say it lightly, I just see them gutting out major government departments as opposed to making them more efficient. There's a difference between just cutting funding to things and just like firing whole sections of people and actually making them more efficient. If he's going to go make things more efficient, then I'm all for it. But only time will tell. And that's kind of where we've ended here. So like we've been going for, I don't know, since about 8:30 this morning. So we've been going for a couple of hours. I just wanted to like, kind of touch base and see what trajectory we're potentially going on after Trump's victory the other day, what potentially might happen and what the world is saying. And like people are uneasy, and like we heard that in the discussion between like what was going on in Ukraine. So like what people are trying to predict what's going to happen with Ukraine, and like basically like the running commentary is like Trump is going to use Zelensky as like a pawn in his negotiations with Russia, so he can bring about some type of end to the conflict. And like Putin is like kind of a master of manipulation, so he's not just going to give up anything he wants to Trump, but like Trump will obviously play the card that if Putin doesn't come to the table and try and cut off the conflict at some point, like Trump will just be like, well, if you don't do this, I've got sanctions on you already, I'm not lifting them, and then two, I'm just going to give better weapons to the Ukrainians who will start being able to fire directly into Russia. They'll be able to start attacking Russia on home soil. So Trump's going to kind of use that threat to try and control basically what Putin is going to be doing on the Ukraine front. In terms of Israel, though, like the sentiment is very much this. Trump doesn't care at all what happens to the Arabs. Okay, he's in bed obviously with Netanyahu, but Trump has definitely been playing up this rhetoric of him being the guy that sorts out the world's problems in terms of wars. He doesn't start no new wars and he ends wars, like kind of thing. So in saying that, he's probably just going to give like a dog whistle or like a mess. He's going to send us a message to Netanyahu and just say, whatever you're trying to do there between Hezbollah and Hamas, like basically whatever you're doing in trying to wipe out the Palestinians and trying to encroach into Lebanese territory, finish it up quick, smart, and just end it. Get it over and done with. He's not going to try and stop them from doing whatever the hell they want to do, but he is going to, like I said, he's just going to want to cut it off. So at some point through his tenure, through his term, he can be like, I fixed whatever's going on in the Middle East at the moment, and I brought some calm to that situation. That's what he's going to want to do, and that's like the opinion of people out there about what Trump is going to try and get out of the whole Israel issue, because Israel is going absolutely rogue at the moment, and like the whole world. Like if the BRICS told us anything, like those other countries that get together that like are pretty prominent, like globally from an economic perspective, they are all damning what Israel is doing. They're all asking for Israel to be kind of tried for war crimes and stuff like that. Like the UN, like have been asking for this as well. It's just the US that are holding out with their little puppy dog and just being like, no. Yeah, just don't do that again, Israel. That was naughty. But like Trump's not going to be playing a game like that where he's just like kind of kindly asking Israel to do stuff. He's most likely, like I said, just going to be like, hurry up, finish off what you got to do, and let's get back to business. So I guess only time will tell if these predictions are true or not. Now, thank you for everyone who's joined in over the last 2.5 hours. Really appreciate the input and the commentary, and anyone who has made suggestions and had questions that we've looked into. So thank you very much for tuning in. Give it a like, leave a comment. It's good for the algorithm. You know the score, I'm on Patreon, so there's a link in the description. Please go over and join and become a member for free. Like I said, I want to start a community over there. The communication channel is much better. We can talk about revolutionary things, and we can look at things specifically over there and build that community. If you can support me financially over there, that would be fantastic. As Jerry Poppins has pointed out, in the future, it would also help for me to get then YouTube Premium, so ads don't keep popping up in my live stream, which is a really good point. But like, I'm not going to be able to afford that sort of stuff until I get some financial backing off you, my Patreons. So like, go over there and join up, please. Until next time, please remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery. That's right. Have a good day and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you very much.